Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. Keith, how we doing?
Great, how are you?
Good, man. Today's topic is one that's near and dear to our hearts. It's kind of the core of what we do. The E in EMD stands for education. And we want to talk about a couple things, but the first and foremost, we want to talk about the importance of being educated in this process. And it's not just the stuff that's easy to Google. It's being educated on the nuance and the details, kind of the quote unquote, if you will, the inside baseball of the recruiting process. And it's tough to get that without having lived it, experienced it, and actually been a part of it. It's one thing to go through the recruiting process as a player, and we know there's some families out there who've gone through it with their kids, but I think it's another thing to be thoroughly educated on kind of the start to finish and everything in between that isn't as easily accessible, and oftentimes is, we see it on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. Like you get some people out there that are putting out some stuff that isn't necessarily accurate. So we want to talk about that for a little bit. So why don't you kick us off here, Coach Glass? We'll talk about the importance of being educated.
Sure. The hardest part in going through the recruiting process, and in the 16 years I coached college baseball, the amount of families who sat across from me that were going through this for the first time, were far outweighed the people who had gone through this before or really knew what to kind of expect in the recruiting process. And when I left and I was able to do this with you, it was one of the big things that I really believed in and really liked about what we do is that we're able to educate families, through our podcast and through what we do on the recruiting process, because, let's face it, the reality is this is a veiled process. College coaches play a lot of things close to their chest. They're not necessarily going to give up a lot of information, and it's not easy to really navigate this process if you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. You can burn a lot of money going to showcases and camps and clinics, and with that comes the extra costs of travel and hotels and sometimes airfare and, all those types of things. And if you don't necessarily know where to go, you don't necessarily know how to target, what types of schools you should be looking at, what level you should be looking at, and the basics of what are the rules from a recruiting standpoint. Like, what are the rules at the Division I level, the Division II, Division III, JUCO, NAIA? Like, they're all different. They're not the same. It's not a blanket recruiting rule at the Division I level that holds true at the Division III level. So I think, for us, the thing that we really enjoy is being able to honestly tell people, because we did that, like we lived this as careers for, 25 plus years combined, of being able to help families navigate this process, specifically in the programs that we were recruiting for, where now we can kind of be on the other side of it and help families navigate this process to find the right fit for the program and the school that they're looking for. So I think that it's, there's more to just being able to Google some of this stuff and try to figure it out yourself, where, you have people like us who have lived this. We've lived on the road. We've recruited a ton. We've seen a ton of games. We've been to name the tournament. We named the showcase. We've been to it, the camp, the clinic, whatever. We've talked to families. We've worked them through this process. And I would even argue that we've probably helped some families when we were coaching that, ended up not ending up with us. And that's fine, because, you start asking some questions that open up a couple more doors for people. And, maybe they decide that, like, we're not the right fit. And that's okay, because in this process, you're going to say no more than you're going to say yes, right? Ideally, you say yes once, and getting to that yes, that one yes, takes a lot of time, energy, and effort, and targeted plans and a lot of research and understanding what it is that is going to be the right fit academically and athletically for your son and the family, because you have to take into account tuition and cost and room and board and everything that goes into it. So, being able to have people help you navigate this process, I think for us is what, really drives what we do and what we really enjoy doing and helping families through this process.
Yeah, it's the core of what we do, and it's why we do it. And I think it's, to a certain extent, I think it's what separates us from other people and other people that do this kind of stuff is that one, there's the experience factor, but two, like generally educating people on stuff that we've lived. Like we lived it for, 25 plus years, and we've got, dozens and dozens and, I don't know, maybe hundreds of contacts that we learn from on an everyday basis, the guys that we talk through about updating the current landscape. And I think that when you go through this, you want to arm yourself with as much information as possible. Like it's a complex journey, and you want to give yourself the best chance possible. And a lot of that is being educated on not just the easy stuff to find on the internet. Like, yeah, you can easily Google what's the recruiting calendar, right? But what are you going to do with that? How's that going to apply? Do you have the information needed to know how to use that calendar to your advantage? Being educated on that, being educated on the intricacies of college baseball, how rosters are constructed, the different levels of play, how scholarships work. You start to drill down on a lot of this stuff, and it's not something that you can learn on the fly. And kind of how I liken it is if you're in school and you got to take a final, if you're not educated on the recruiting process, it's like walking into the final having never gone to class all year. You might be able to pass the test, but in all likelihood, if you're trying to get a good score on that test and you're trying to get a good result, you probably want to show up to class every day and make sure that you're doing a homework. And I think there are a lot of families that think that you can get through this by just being talented. And some kids will get a result from that. Kids who are super talented, and it's just so easy to identify that they're a super high level player. But that's such a small percentage of players. And I would argue that a lot of those players probably need a lot more guidance than they think they do. And better understanding opportunities, better understanding coaching staffs, better understanding, what an offer entails and what are you getting yourself into from a level of play and opportunity perspective. There's a lot of questions when you get down to that, even when you have somebody who has a ton of offers. But at the end of the day, doing your homework, having the resources that are needed to get educated on the process, I think that's a foundational element that gets skipped sometimes because there's this idea that, well, if I'm good, they'll find me. And even if you are good, and even if they do find you, I would ask yourself, wouldn't you want to be armed with the best information possible so that you can make a really good decision for your family and yourself? And I think that that's way more than understanding the recruiting calendar and understanding that there's 11.7 scholarships at the Division I level. Like that's such surface level information that if you're going to get this right, you need to go far below the surface and you really need to dig into the nuances of this and understand it, not specific to what you think it is, but understand it broadly so you can see the whole ecosystem that college baseball operates under.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said it better myself. There's a lot that goes into just a one potential student athlete journey in the recruitment process. There's multiple schools, there's going to be multiple coaches. There's a lot of things that go into that, and then you want to dive into what type of school it is, what is the cost of attendance, what does the roster look like, what level of play is it, do you fit at that level of play? There's way more that goes into this than just, to your point, if I'm good, they'll find me, which is true in some regard, but you might be able to put yourself in a little bit of a better situation going to some more targeted events and doing some things that are going to put you in front of more people that'll be able to find you because you are good, which might lead to more opportunities or even a better opportunity. And when that stuff starts to happen, you want to be able to be educated on, what it is that you need to do to navigate that process to find the right fit. Because everyone wants to talk about the transfer portal nowadays and how many people are in it and this, that, and the other thing. But, ideally you want to, like I said earlier, say yes once and be able to stay at that school for 4 or 5 years, depending on what happens, because you have five years to play four. So you want to stay there for 4 or 5 years and be able to stick at a place where it's the right fit, not only athletically and academically, but from a support system standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a growth standpoint, everything it is that you're looking to get out of that college experience, you want to be able to find that first time through. And being educated on that process is paramount, and it takes a lot of anxiety and stress out of the situation as well. Because if you have an idea and you're educated on what it is that you're about to undertake, you can start making better decisions because you know what it is that you're going through. And you can start asking better questions, more informed questions that get to the answers that you're looking for, that are going to be able to get you to arrive at the decision that's going to get you the right fit at the end of the day.
The last thing that we want to see, and we come across it every year, and I'm sure it's going to happen again this summer, is you get people who call in a panic that, well, we're not getting recruited, or we don't know what we're doing. And a lot of that stress, a lot of that anxiety can be alleviated by just doing some homework, just spending the time to get familiar with the process, just spending some time to sit down as a family and go through some really basic stuff. Now it can be, it can be a large undertaking, right? Sifting through a lot of the BS, targeted research into topics that, kind of to your point, it's the recruiting process is veiled in a lot of ways. Like, throw an AI machine learning term out there, it can be a black box at sometimes, and you just don't have visibility into what the components of it are. So there is some gray area there. And how do you close that gap? That's something that previously you got to be really creative with. But taking the time to research, taking the time to get educated, I think it's the first step. If you're a high school player, or you're a high school parent or you're a parent of a player in high school who desires to go play college baseball, or any college sport for that matter, not just baseball. Obviously for us, it's specific to baseball, but if you're just talking broadly, the first thing you need to do is get educated on the actual recruiting process. Like, yeah, I know everybody wants to play for the flashy travel team and they want to go to the flashy events, but I can promise you that that's just a small piece of the puzzle. It's not a requirement. You don't have to play for the best travel team in the country to get recruited. But if you're educated and you understand the process, you understand where you fit, you understand the landscape of college baseball, you understand the potential timing for where you're at from a talent perspective, you can now develop a plan that can be really effective by just getting information that you may not otherwise have. Instead of waiting for it to happen for you, take some ownership of the process and really start to dig into the information that you need to successfully navigate this. Because it's tough to find your endpoint. It's one thing to know where you want to go. It's another thing to know where you start. But what that path from start to finish looks like, if you're just sailing blindly, just hoping you're going to get to your destination, you're not putting yourself in an advantageous position. And education is really where it starts. Fundamentally, it's really where it starts.
You're a rudderless ship, I think is the term.
At the mercy of the waves.
Right. So my question to you then, Andy, is how do we go about educating people?
So, Keith, funny you should ask. So me and Keith spent quite a bit of time, a lot of hours developing a comprehensive online learning academy that meets the goal of exactly what we talked about, which is distilling not just the basics and some of the fundamental information, but really diving into a lot of the detail that is needed for families and student athletes to get educated on this process. We'll spend some time to kind of go into it, but the fundamental purpose of it is there's no one-stop shop to really get educated on the recruiting process. And like I said, we're not just talking about, well, this is what a dead period is. We're talking about being able to distill down the information on how college coaches actually evaluate players, breaking down the nuance and the detail around the competition level across college baseball, laying out the importance of academics and how that can impact your search and your recruiting process. We're talking about very detailed descriptions of information that is not readily available. It's not something that you can Google, because the only way you can attain it is really having actually lived it or experienced it. It's one thing to be able to make some broad statements and some broad strokes across topics that are, that are popular. It's another thing to actually have substance there based on what we lived for 25 combined years in the college baseball world, and another 8 as players. There's a different level of detail, a different perspective that I think that we're able to provide to families. And after a lot of conversation and really thinking about, well, how can we not only help individual student athletes, which we do, and we've had a ton of success helping families navigate on a more personal level, but how can we impact student athletes and their families more broadly? Like, how can we make all this stuff that we have in our heads and all this experience that we have as coaches, how can we make that accessible? And, we landed on developing a really user-friendly, it's a technologically advanced platform with media, easy navigation, quizzes, all kinds of different capabilities that are going to allow families to learn on their own.
Yeah, I think the academy that we've been able to create is something that over 25 years of doing this, we've been able to pour into essentially an online course that is developed for parents and student athletes to be able to go through to educate themselves on what they need to know, what they should expect, and how they can navigate this process. Sure, you can Google some of this stuff and figure it out, but without some context and without necessarily knowing how to use that information, it's not necessarily going to be able to point you in the right direction. And I think what we've been able to do is put something together, in 10 modules or chapters that allow you to be able to really get into this entire process, and I think, building a foundation, in the first couple chapters, if you will, like we do when it comes to the academic eligibility at all of the levels, right? So, in this, we're going to talk about Division I, Division II, Division III, JUCO baseball, and NAIA baseball. But the eligibility and academic requirements, because all of those levels have different requirements. What do those look like? Are you eligible at these levels? Because if you're not eligible, you're not going to be able to be recruited at those levels, right? First and foremost, you need to understand what it takes to be academically eligible in order to even start this process from a recruitment standpoint. And then the recruiting rules, because like I said before, all the recruiting rules at at all the levels are completely different from each other. Not one recruiting rule from Division I, II, or III, JUCO, NAIA is the same. And that can get pretty complex because, I can't tell you how many kids when I was at RPI would email me and be like, I know we're in a dead period and I can't do anything. Like, hey man, like Division III doesn't have a dead period. You can come visit right now. We're not in a dead period. Division I is in a dead period, but we're not. So it's understanding what the rules are at those levels, because once you understand the eligibility and the rules, then that's going to start to build your process for what your spring, your summer, and your supplemental schedule to those games, to your tournaments and games look like, right? Because if they're in a quiet period at the Division I level, there's not going to be a lot of people at that event that is going on. You should know that. because that's going to save you money in the long run. If you're trying to get recruited by a Division I school and there's a showcase going on during a quiet period, nobody can be there from a Division I standpoint. So why would you go spend the money? And if you have to fly there or drive there, or get a hotel, whatever, like that's money that we're spending to literally be seen by nobody that you want to be seen by. And that's something that you need to know in this process. You need to know what those things are, because it's going to drive your decision making. That's going to, then hopefully make you make better decisions through this. It's going to help you save money in the long run, because you're not going to go spend $1,000 to go to a showcase that nobody you want to be recruited by is at. We'll also go into competition in college baseball and what it looks like at all the levels, the tiers of college baseball, and how competitive it is at the, Division I, II, III, JUCO, NAIA levels, and how not all of college baseball is created equal. We've talked about it on here before. Like, there's Division II and III teams that compete at the Division I level. There's Division I teams that, might not necessarily be the most competitive in a Division II conference. So understanding that aspect of it too, that it's not just a blanket statement that Division I is the best and Division II is the second best and Division III is, the third best. In JUCO baseball, people look down their nose. Like, we've talked about it before. Look at some of the top rosters in the country. They're littered with JUCO guys. Like, the JUCO baseball is really good. So you want to understand what these things look like, because it's going to start to drive what your decision is in this process to be able to be recruited.
Yeah, I mean, not it's cliche, but like knowledge is power when it comes to this. And, I think that not only is there a ton of information being laid out regarding some of those details, but, we hit on some other topics that are incredibly important, which is the academic portion. We lay that out in a ton of detail. The importance that academics play in recruiting, and why you need to make sure that you're locking down that portion of your development, and how that impacts from a financial perspective, from a recruitability perspective, from a school access perspective. And another piece of the puzzle is this is probably the biggest black box that there is in the recruiting process is what does the evaluation process look through? What's it look like through a college coach's perspective? We hear, a lot of people, wow, he's a Division I player. He's a Division I player. Like, he could play at that school, or he's good enough to play in your program. Like, I can't tell you how many times I'd have a travel coach call me and be like, this kid good enough to play for you, knowing full well that they had actually never seen us play and they have no idea what we're capable of doing or what our players look like. And, you got to understand what these coaches are actually looking at and what do they value? What are the pieces of the puzzle that they're considering? Because a lot of times it goes well beyond just the pure talent perspective. If you listen to any of our other interviews that we've done on the podcast in the past, to a coach, every single one of them has hammered home, yeah, we can find talented guys, but we need to find the right kind of kids. We need to find the right kind of families. And understand the things these guys look at in order to evaluate a kid's character. Yeah, it's easy to talk to in a law enforcement setting, but if you're not familiar with this process and you can't wrap your head around that your evaluation isn't just going to be how hard you throw and how fast you run, you're missing a huge portion of the talent evaluation, and you're probably not setting yourself up for a ton of success when it comes to being able to present yourself from coaches. How do you behave? How do you interact with with your travel ball guys? With your high school coach, like what are you doing from that respect? As far as how you're handling yourself and how you present yourself. And the other thing that I think has a lot of gray area is like, what should the role of the parent be? And is there certain things that a parent should be doing? Is there certain things that they should be more involved in? How should they be guiding their student athlete? There's some tips, there's some basics there that are really important in order for that process to go well, because you can speak to it, and I know I can speak to it. You get a kid on a campus visit, if mom and dad are the focus of the visit, like that's a red flag that the kid he's not leading the charge. He's not the one who's leading the recruiting process. So being educated from a parent perspective, and how to handle yourself and how you should be supporting your student athlete throughout this process. That's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Huge piece. And I think I think we go into a lot of detail into how we should navigate this as families, and kids, and what that evaluation process kind of looks like from a coach's standpoint. Because again, we've done it for a very long time, or we did do it for a very long time, I should say. And then we also go into the breakdown of all the divisions, because again, they're not the same, right? Like there's more games being played at the Division I level than there are at the Division II and III level. There's the same amount of games being played at the Division I level at the NCAA as there are at the JUCO level. So there's a lot of different things that go into each division, and within that, the rules of what they can do from a practice standpoint, what they can do, in the off season, how long you can practice in the fall is longer at the Division I than the Division III level. Individuals, things like that. When you can start up. Division III is different than Division I, and Division II is different than 1 and 3. And same thing at JUCO NAIA. So, I think, with what we break down there, like it goes further into detail into what you should expect at those levels, and setting that foundation of what you need to know moving forward, right? Because what you want to do, especially when you go on visits and you start meeting with coaches, when you get to that point, one of the things that tells me that a kid is squared away and knows that the family knows kind of what they're doing is like, all right, like your Division III coach, like you guys get 40 games, how does that break down? Instead of the question of like, how many games do you guys play? What do you do? And that information is readily available on the internet. But, with this, when you get educated and you start understanding, it's like, okay, I know that Division III baseball gets 40 games. Okay. Now, when I go on this visit, I can say, Coach, I know you guys get 40 games. What does that look like? Like, when does your schedule start with those 40 games? Do you go to Florida for however X amount of time? What's the conference schedule look like? What does the travel kind of look like with those 40 games? So you can get a little bit more detailed, and when you're sitting in front of a coach and you have that information already Rolodexed in your mind, and you can start asking more pointed questions to what it is that you're looking for, versus, hey, how many games do you play? Because then from there, it's like, we play 40. Like, where are you going from there? You can really start to get pointed in the direction of what it is important to you that program is going to provide for your college experience, that it is that you're looking for. Because sometimes, not every Division III program goes to Florida from the Northeast Mid-Atlantic, right? Like, some of them do. Some of them take weekend trips and go down into Virginia, North Carolina, things like that, and take a little bit more of a Division I type model where they're playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and coming home, and then doing it again, and then doing it again, which is different than, the traditional, you go down to Florida for a full week and play 7, 8, 9, 10 games. So depending on what it is you're looking for, that's a question that is going to show me like, okay, this family kind of knows what it is already going on, and what is going to, what it is that's important to you in your overall experience. And having that knowledge is obviously, power, like you said. It's kind of like the reading rainbow. The more you know. It's going to give you the opportunity to really guide yourself through this process and get to the bottom of what it is that you really want out of your college experience.
Great reading rainbow reference, by the way. Classic mechanism for learning as a child for myself. I know that much.
Oh, yeah.
I used to watch it at my grandmother's house all the time.
Great show.
Grandma Grace. See her in a couple days for Christmas, hopefully. So,
oh, yeah. Oh, I said hi.
Yeah, of course. Back to the topic at hand. Understanding the differences is huge. Like, most people don't know. They just think that Division III is 13th grade. It's not. Super competitive, which is something we cover in detail in multiple different lessons that we have. Like, we cover the competition in college baseball, the current landscape in college baseball, the tiers of play in college baseball. The easy way out on that is D1, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO, and it's just a laundry list of best to worst. And that's not really how it works. And we break that down. Don't want to give too much info, but we break that down into a more thoughtful uh, and to me, more accurate representation of the current landscape of college baseball. There's tips on how to research schools, information that you need to make to create a good list. How are you going to shoot quality video? What type of information do you need to be tracking? How are you going to communicate with college coaches from an email perspective? Going into detail about the recruiting timelines. I think that's another thing that's really important to understand is when do Division I schools recruit? The new recruiting rules obviously had a big impact on that. When are Division II and Division III schools really ramping up their evaluation period? When are they going to really be looking to bring guys on campus? When are they going to be throwing out offers to kids? Understanding those timelines big because you need to know where you fit in the grand scheme of college baseball. And if you're a 2025 or if you're a 2026 right now and you're not a surefire Division I guy, your timeline's probably going to be pushed back because Division II and Division III, they're not worried about their 2026s until this time next year is when they'll start picking through guys that they like. But even then, their process for 26s is going to go into next summer and into next fall. And it's important to know that because you need to know where you fit. But it also is important to know that because you don't need to have anxiety over everybody else committing. And the stress that comes along with this is relieved by just being educated on a simple fact like that. And then you start getting into tips around and a lot of information around how do you actually develop your own recruiting plan and what are the pieces of the puzzle that you need to understand from an honest evaluation is probably the biggest place you got to start in understanding that having somebody in your corner who can actually give you information about where you fit in college baseball. It's really easy to surround yourself with people who are going to tell you what you want to hear and can do it from an uninformed perspective because it's easy. It's way more valuable to have people in your corner that can provide you information that actually has some strength to it, right? That actually has some tooth and some value to be able to say, hey, this is where you fit right now. And you want to make sure that you have somebody there to control that. And then going through all the different exposure opportunities, you need to have information on that, differentiating between the types of camps. These are all pieces of the puzzle that are covered in what we talk about. And it's information that, to be honest with you, isn't that readily accessible. And it's exactly why we wanted to pull it together into one place.
You had a quote in there that I really liked. I can't remember it right now, but it was good. I wrote it down where it is, but I liked it. Once we kind of get through that part, like to me, that is, all of that stuff that we just covered over the last 20-ish, 30 minutes is really just the foundation for what it is that you kind of need to know in order to navigate this process, right? Like those are all the things that you want to know. And we obviously go a lot more in depth in this than we're kind of covering right now. And there's a lot of information to kind of digest, but once we kind of get through the foundational part, that's when we got to start creating a recruiting plan. What does our targeted plan kind of look like going into this recruitment process? What do I need to do? How do I do this? Where do I go? Those types of things. And how do I build a video? Like, what should my video look like? What should it show? What angle should I show? Should it be behind the pitcher? Should it be behind the catcher? Open side, closed side? Should I be taking video from center field? What are those things? What do those look like? How long should it be? How edited? All of those types of things. And then I think too, the bigger things that we obviously touch on too, once we kind of get through the foundational piece is contacting college coaches. It's a big thing from all the families that we talk to and work with, is can we help in contacting college coaches? And the short answer is yes. But we go into a lot of depth in how you should go about doing that and what that looks like and where you should do it. Is it on social media? Is it email? Is it phone calls, text messages, all of those types of things. Again, when it goes into contacting college coaches, we're going to go back. This is why we set the foundation. Like it goes back to the recruiting rules as well, because that plays a role in when you're able to contact people and what it is that they can respond with and do. And then the last piece of getting into your recruiting plan is the exposure opportunities that are going to be available to you, not only from your high school and your summer ball team, but also what you're going to supplement with, whether it's going to be showcases, whether it's going to be on-campus college camps or private camps, clinics, things like that. What opportunities are out there that are going to be best for you to get in front of the college coaches that you want to be seen by? And kind of the short version, because we've talked about this before on our podcast, if you're not a high-end academic kid, like if you're not looking to go to the Ivy League, like Headfirst and Showball probably shouldn't be an event that you're targeting to go be seen by coaches. Because if that's not a school, if those aren't schools that you're looking to go to, don't pay the money to go to those camps. Pay the money to go to a showcase or another camp where there's coaches that are going to be there of schools that you're interested in going to see. And I think that, sometimes I think with a lot of pressure that's out there, people just go to things because it presents another opportunity. And that's not the best way to go about this. You want to make sure that there's a targeted, a plan and effort on your part to be able to get in front of the people that you want to be seen by so that you can have the most informed feedback that you can get, and then also ultimately be able to make the most informed decision on the schools from the offers you're going to get out of all of these opportunities.
Yeah, that you got to empower yourself with the information that allows you to develop this plan. And it kind of starts, and it does not finish with what we're talking about, but it starts, and a lot of this it kind of accumulates, this information accumulates to the point where you have what you need to get started on this process. And it's important information, and you want to make sure that you're educated on it. You want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to put yourself in a position to be successful at the back end of this recruiting process. We go into offers and how to speak with coaches, how to prepare for a visit. And we try to take you through the life cycle of the recruiting process. And a lot of it culminates at the back end of this, where we start to talk about what it's like to be a college baseball player. How do you transition there? What to expect? How to handle adversity, expectations, time management. For us, the recruiting process doesn't finish with that commitment graphic. And it's something that we say to every single family that we work with, that our job's not done then. The job is done in a certain extent when a kid gets on campus and he's prepared to go and be successful there. And we also wanted to make sure that we were able to weave in that kind of information, because that's an important thing to understand, that you got to know what you're ultimately trying to embark on. If you haven't played college athletics, you don't know what being a college athlete is like. You can talk to your friends and stuff, but it's one thing to hear it from your friends who go through it. It's another thing to hear it from people who have 25 years of experience watching 40 guys a year go through this process. And we try to distill that down into some really digestible information to help guys not only get recruited and find a good home, but also make sure that when they step on that campus, they have the information ready and they've digested that information to where they can go be successful when we get there. Because we both know the guys who walk onto campus prepared are the ones who generally are successful when they're there. And those first 6 months when guys are on campus, they can be really tough. And being prepared for that is a huge part of the success. And we want our guys that we work with, and we want people who go through this academy and ultimately learn from us. We want to make sure that they're not only successful in the recruiting process, but they're successful when they actually get to the school that they ultimately end up playing at.
Right. We would be doing a disservice if we didn't cover things that you need to expect when you get to college, because we can take you through the process, but that's, in my personal opinion, about 80 to 85% of what it is that we're doing from an education standpoint. Because once you do commit, and you'll see it all the time, like, oh, the journey starts now. Like, in some regards, it's true. Like, you need to have an understanding of what it's going to be like those first couple of months when you get to college. what it's like to have a lot more time and a lot more freedom, and what it looks like to have to go to lift and practice and class and get good grades and study hall and all the other things it is that you're going to have to do your freshman year, and specifically in the fall, but also what it relates to what you're going to face during the spring semester of your freshman year, right? Like it's something that you've never experienced ever in your entire life. The travel, the amount of games, the going to class, the school, the homework, the tests, the finals, the everything that goes into that. And you're still lifting, and you're managing your social life and eating and all of those things that go into just being a human being in college. If we don't mention that and talk about that, it would be a disservice to anybody it is that we're trying to educate on this process, because that's just as much a process of the recruitment process as it is anything else, because you need to know what it is that you're going to expect. Because you're right, like you can talk to your buddies and do whatever you want, and you can talk to us like we did it, but what we did 20 years ago is far different than what's going on now. So I think that ultimately it's broken down in digestible enough chapters and modules with videos and all this stuff that and it is designed for entire families to go through, right? Like it's not just designed for the student athlete to go through. It's not just designed for the parents, designed for both of you and everybody, so that everybody is all on the same page with what's going on, in the recruitment process, and how you can create a targeted plan to be able to be recruited and know what it is to expect, not only from being recruited, but also once you do get some offers and you make that final decision and you say yes, and hopefully it's just once, and then what you need to expect after that. So there's a lot of things that I think when you go through this process, it's kind of that old adage of how do you eat an elephant, right? Like it's one bite at a time. So you try to go into this and you're trying to do so much at once because you don't know. And it seems like it's super sped up. You don't know what's going on. You can really slow this down by being able to be educated on this entire process and understand, like, okay, we're doing this one bite at a time. We understand what's going on here. We can really start making a targeted effort to be able to understand what it is that we need to do in order to be recruited, to find the right fit, for our son to be able to go play college baseball somewhere.
Yeah. And I think that this academy, it helps not just the person who doesn't know anything, but it helps the novice as well. And I think that's one of the things that we run across going through this, and we ran across it as coaches as well, is that there's a lot of people out there who don't know what they don't know. And I think that people who go through this academy are going to find out, like, wow, there's a lot of information that I'm really glad that I know now. Things that they probably haven't even thought about in terms of how it impacts the recruiting process. And if you're a high school player, you're a high school student athlete, parent, and your kid has aspirations of playing collegiate baseball, this is a really good place to start. And if you're armed with the information that we put into this academy and you go through it step by step and you pass the quizzes and you watch the videos and you pay attention to the graphics, on the back side of this, you're going to come out much more prepared to navigate this on your own if you choose. But worst case scenario, you're going to have all the information that you need to help yourself make a really informed, quality decision and be able to put together a recruiting plan that you can execute as a family. And I think that's why we did it. I think we executed on it. I'm really excited that this is getting launched and that we're going to be able to impact more families, more players. So, if you're a family, somebody who has ambitions of playing collegiate baseball, this is a really good place to start to get educated and really give yourself the information that you need to plot a path forward.
I think the other thing too is that it's never too late, right? Like I think the one thing, and I don't know if we've talked about this recently on any of our podcasts, but I'll say it now because it's been at the forefront of my mind. The amount of families that we've talked to, especially recently in recent months, that of some 25s, but mostly 26s and 7s, that one of the first things they say is, we feel like we're so far behind in this. And I want to be the first one to tell you, like, nobody is too far behind, especially right now. And I think a lot of this is coming from the new rule change. And I think it's very important to understand that this rule change is designed to slow everything down, and it is. And you've seen so many younger kids over the last decade commit super early, and now it's just ground to a complete halt. And it's not going to happen anytime soon because you can't entertain offers. You can't do any of that stuff until August 1st going into your junior year. So you have a lot of people who have seen so many younger kids commit, and then now all of a sudden it grinds to a halt. And one, I think a lot of people don't know the rule change. So they're wondering, like, why am I not getting recruited? Why am I not getting offers? I saw all these other 26s and 27s get them. Like, it's not going to happen anymore. So it's you're not behind by any stretch of the imagination. And the best thing you can do, and especially now because everything is slowed down, is educate yourself on what this process is going to look like over the course of the next 12, 18, 24 months for you, so that you have an idea and a really good plan moving forward so that you can get recruited and maximize the amount of opportunities that you're going to give yourself to get in front of the coaches it is that you want to be seen by. And I can't reiterate it enough. Like, you're not behind. All the parents and kids that are out there listening, like, you're not behind right now. This rule change is doing what it's supposed to. It's slowing everything down. But because over the course of the last decade, it's literally been a bullet train. Like, it just ground to a halt on the track, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So you have to understand you're not behind, and it's the perfect opportunity to be like, okay, everything's slowed down. I'm not behind. Let's get educated on what it is we need to know, what we need to do, and then start making a targeted effort in what it is that we need to do so that we get in front of all the people that we need to get in front of.
Yep. Spot on, Coach. I mean, I think the moral of the story is get in there and mix it up. Go check this out. You can find it on our website, emdbaseball.com. Click on the services tab up top and go to Online Academy. Ton of information on that page. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. If you got any questions, you can hit us up on Twitter, EMD Baseball. You can hit us up on Instagram at EMD Baseball. Feel free to shoot us an email. You can find our contact information on the website. And if you're listening to this podcast, we got a special occasion for you. Type in Dugout Dish 10 and you'll get 10% off your purchase of the Online Academy. Thanks everybody for listening. Anything else you want to add, Coach?
No, we're good.
All right. Thanks everybody. Talk to you soon. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new Online Academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.